The massive alien ship emerged from the darkness of space, its sleek silver hull reflecting Earth's sunlight as it approached the moon's orbit. Inside the vessel, Ambassador Robert Smith stood beside the window, his weathered face showing no sign of the anxiety churning in his stomach. He was humanity's chosen representative, selected for his calm demeanor and diplomatic experience. The ship belonged to the Galactic Federation, a peaceful alliance of 23 alien species who had been watching Earth for decades. They had chosen this moment to reveal themselves, believing humanity had finally reached a suitable level of technological advancement. Ambassador Smith, we are approaching the Federation's Central Council chamber, announced his alien guide, a tall, blue-skinned being called First Speaker. The alien's multiple eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Smith had learned meant friendliness. The chamber was enormous, with curved walls that seemed to stretch endlessly upward. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in tiered seats, their varied forms creating a living rainbow of colors and shapes. Some floated in special containers filled with their native atmospheres, while others stood on multiple legs or hovered using personal gravity devices. The head council member, a dignified creature with silver scales and flowing robes, rose from the central platform. "Welcome, human ambassador. We have observed your species for many cycles of your sun." Smith nodded respectfully. "On behalf of Earth, I thank you for this historic meeting." The council member's translator conveyed their next words with a slight delay. "We have reviewed your species' history extensively. It concerns us." Smith had expected this. Earth's violent past was no secret. "Every species must learn from its mistakes to grow," he replied carefully. "Your kind has fought more wars in 1,000 years than most species do in their entire history," another council member stated, their crystalline body structure catching the light. "Yet you have also made remarkable progress in science, art, and philosophy." The chamber filled with murmured discussions in dozens of alien languages. Smith noticed some representatives physically backing away from him, while others leaned forward with interest. "We have decided," the head council member announced, "to offer Earth provisional membership in the Federation. However, there are conditions." Smith listened as they outlined their terms. Earth would need to reduce its military forces, share its peaceful technologies, and accept Federation guidance in interstellar matters. The conditions were reasonable, even generous, considering humanity's rookie status in galactic society. "We accept these terms," Smith responded, "with the understanding that Earth maintains the right to self-defense." The council agreed, though Smith noticed several members exchanging meaningful glances. They didn't understand that humans' capacity for warfare wasn't just about aggression. It was about survival, adaptation, and protecting what they cared about. As the meeting concluded, First Speaker guided Smith through the ship's corridors. "Your species fascinates us," they said. "You create beautiful music and art, yet you also design weapons of tremendous destruction. You show great kindness to other creatures, yet you wage war against your own kind." Smith smiled slightly. "Humans are complex. We contain contradictions. Perhaps that is what makes you dangerous," First Speaker mused. "Or perhaps it's what makes us valuable allies," Smith countered. Later that night, in his assigned quarters aboard the Federation ship, Smith reviewed the day's events. The aliens' advanced technology and peaceful cooperation were impressive, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were naive. Their society had never faced true existential threats, never needed to fight for survival like humanity had countless times. Little did he know that in just a few months, the Federation would face its greatest challenge, and when that time came, they would learn exactly why humans' understanding of warfare made them both valuable and terrifying allies. Looking out at the stars, Smith whispered, "I hope they never have to find out what humanity is truly capable of when pushed into a corner." The Federation's massive ship continued its silent journey through space, carrying within it the seeds of changes that would reshape galactic society forever. 3 months after Earth joined the Federation, Ambassador Smith sat in an emergency council meeting. The atmosphere was different from his first visit. Gone was the calm diplomacy, replaced by barely contained panic. The head council members' scales had lost their shine, their voice trembling as they spoke. The swarm has breached our outer defenses. 3 colony worlds have gone silent in the past week alone. Holographic displays showed massive black ships moving through space like locusts, consuming everything in their path. The swarm wasn't interested in conquest or negotiation. They simply devoured worlds, breaking down all matter for resources. Our defensive strategies have failed, declared a council member, their crystalline form dulled with stress. Traditional battle formations prove useless. They adapt too quickly. Smith watched the recordings of Federation ships arranged in perfect geometric patterns, fighting with predetermined tactics that might have looked impressive in a parade, but proved catastrophic in actual combat. The swarm ships simply ignored the expected rules of engagement, swarming through gaps and overwhelming their targets. Ambassador, the head council member turned to Smith. We have studied your species' military history. Your kind has survived countless wars, emerging stronger each time. We request human military advisors to assist our forces. A murmur of shock rippled through the chamber. Many representatives seemed horrified at the suggestion of allowing humans to influence military matters. One floating representative expelled bubbles of distress in their containment tank. You cannot be serious, protested a tall, thin alien with iridescent skin. Their warfare techniques are barbaric. They practice deception in battle. Smith couldn't help but smile slightly. We call it strategy. They target supply lines instead of facing enemies directly. Another added. We call that logistics warfare. Smith explained patiently. War isn't about fighting fair. It's about achieving objectives while preserving your own forces. The head council member raised their hand for silence. We have no choice. The swarm has destroyed everything in its path for the last 300 years. Our peaceful methods have failed. Smith stood up, his voice carrying across the chamber. Earth will help, but you need to understand something. If you want human military assistance, you get all of it, not just the parts you're comfortable with. We don't fight with rules of engagement that help our enemies. We fight to win. What exactly would this mean? Asked first speaker, who had been quietly observing. It means we'll teach your forces everything. Guerrilla warfare, psychological operations, asymmetric combat, adaptive strategies. We'll show you how to fight dirty when needed, how to use the enemy's strength against them, and how to think like predators instead of prey. The chamber erupted in shocked discussions. Some representatives seemed ready to flee the room, while others leaned forward with desperate hope. And you believe these methods will work against the swarm? The head council member asked. Smith pointed to the holographic display showing the swarm's attacks. They've never faced an enemy that thinks like us. They've never fought someone who changes tactics mid-battle, who sets traps, who thinks 3 moves ahead. They're about to learn why humanity's warlike history isn't just a sign of barbarism. It's a testament to our survival. After hours of heated debate, the council voted. The decision was made. Humanity would be allowed to provide military advisors to the Federation forces. As Smith left the chamber, first speaker fell into step beside him. Many are afraid of what this means, they said quietly. They should be, Smith replied. War isn't pretty, but sometimes it's necessary for survival. The swarm is about to learn why every species that ever tried to conquer Earth eventually regretted it. He sent the message to Earth that evening. Request approved. Send the advisors. As he watched the stars from his window, Smith remembered an old human saying, "Be careful what you wish for." The Federation had asked for humanity's help in fighting a war. They were about to learn exactly what that meant, for better or worse. The galaxy would never be the same. General James Walker stood in the Federation's main military command center, watching their combat simulations with growing concern. Beside him, Colonel Williams shook his head in disbelief. They had spent the last week reviewing the Federation's military capabilities, and what they found was worse than expected. "Show me that last battle again," Walker commanded. The holographic display replayed a recent engagement where Federation ships formed a perfect diamond formation against the swarm. The results were predictable: total massacre. Their entire military doctrine is based on ceremonial combat, Williams muttered. They're fighting a space war like it's a chess game. Walker watched as Federation officers demonstrated their standard tactics. Their ships would announce their presence, take positions according to ancient combat protocols, and expect their enemies to do the same. It was like watching soldiers from the 18th century trying to fight a modern war. "Captain," Walker called to a Federation officer, "why did your ships maintain formation even after the swarm broke through your lines?" The alien captain, a tall being with metallic skin, looked confused. Breaking formation would be dishonorable. The combat codes of the Federation clearly state. "The combat codes are getting your people killed," Walker interrupted. He walked to the holographic display and began manipulating it. "Look here. When the swarm attacked your left flank, you had 3 cruisers that could have performed a pincer movement. Instead, they stayed in position and were destroyed. But a pincer movement would be an ambush tactic," the captain protested. "That's not allowed under Section 7 of the..." Williams slammed his hand on the console. "The swarm doesn't care about your rules. They're eating entire planets. This isn't a ceremony. It's survival." Walker pulled up the statistics. Federation forces had lost over 40% of their fleet in the past month alone. Their ground forces were even worse. They had no concept of cover, flanking maneuvers, or tactical retreats. Their soldiers would stand in neat rows, making perfect targets. "General," a Federation commander approached, their multiple eyes blinking rapidly, "we've observed that your assessment seems negative." Walker took a deep breath. "Your forces are brave, and your technology is impressive. But your military thinking is thousands of years out of date. You're fighting like everyone agreed to the same rulebook." He pulled up Earth's military history on the display. "Look at how warfare evolved on our world. From ancient battles to modern conflicts, the side that adapted faster usually won. The Americans didn't win their revolution by fighting the British in neat rows. The Soviet Union didn't defeat Nazi Germany by following a gentleman's agreement." The Federation officers watched in horror as Walker showed them guerrilla warfare tactics, asymmetric combat scenarios, and modern military strategies. Some looked physically ill when he explained concepts like false retreats, decoy operations, and psychological warfare. "This is barbaric," one officer whispered. "No," Walker corrected. "This is effective. The swarm is winning because they don't play by your rules. Neither should you." He brought up a new simulation, showing how Federation ships could use asteroids for cover, split their formations to create crossfire, and lay mines in apparent retreat paths. The alien officers watched with a mixture of fascination and revulsion. "We need to completely rebuild your combat doctrine," Walker announced. "From basic training to fleet operations, everything needs to change, and we need to do it fast." "How long will this take?" the Federation commander asked. "To do it properly, years. But we don't have years. We have weeks, maybe months before the swarm reaches your core worlds. So we'll have to do this the hard way." Walker looked at the assembled alien officers, seeing the dawning realization in their expressions. They were beginning to understand that their entire concept of warfare was about to be turned upside down. "Tomorrow," he declared, "we start real combat training. It won't be pretty, it won't be honorable, but it will keep you alive. And more importantly, it will teach the swarm why picking a fight with humanity's allies was their biggest mistake." The Federation officers left the command center in stunned silence, leaving Walker and Williams alone with the holographic displays of battles yet to come. "They're not ready for this," Williams said quietly. "They better get ready," Walker replied, "because the swarm isn't going to wait." Captain Mary Thompson watched as Federation soldiers struggled through the combat simulation, their movements still too rigid, too predictable. It had been 2 weeks since the human military advisors began their crash course in modern warfare, and progress was painfully slow. "No, no, no," she shouted, stopping the exercise. "You're still bunching up. Spread out. You're giving the enemy one big target." The alien soldiers looked at her in confusion. Their squad leader, a tall being with armored skin, stepped forward. "But Captain, the combat manual states that unity and formation represents." "The combat manual is getting you killed," Thompson interrupted. She grabbed a handful of training markers from her pocket. "Watch this." She arranged the markers in a tight group. "This is your current formation." With one sweep of her hand, she knocked them all down. "This is what the swarm does to you." She spread the markers out. "This is how you should fight. Make them work for every kill. Make them chase you. Make them waste resources." The aliens watched as she demonstrated basic squad tactics, their expressions a mixture of horror and fascination. The concept of deliberately breaking formation went against thousands of years of their military tradition. In another part of the training facility, Thompson's combat simulators were revolutionizing space combat training. She had designed them based on Earth's naval warfare doctrine, treating space as a three-dimensional ocean. Federation pilots were learning to use debris fields as cover, to perform hit-and-run attacks, and to set up crossfire ambushes. "Your ships have amazing technology," she explained to a group of Federation commanders. "But you use them like parade floats. Watch this." She activated a simulation showing Earth's historical naval battles. "See how these ancient wooden ships used weather, terrain, and surprise to defeat larger forces. Now imagine doing that in space." The Federation officers flinched as she showed them recordings of Earth's more recent conflicts: guerrilla warfare, urban combat, asymmetric battles. But they couldn't argue with the results. In simulated encounters, crews using human tactics were now lasting 3 times longer against swarm attacks. "Captain," a young Federation pilot approached her after a particularly intense training session, their bioluminescent skin pulsed with anxiety. "What you're teaching us, it feels wrong. Like we're becoming something else." Thompson softened her voice. "You're becoming survivors. The swarm doesn't care about honor or tradition. They care about results. So should you." She pulled up footage of their latest simulation. "Look here. Your squad used terrain masking to ambush a superior force. You used decoy drones to draw their fire. You retreated strategically to split their forces. And you won. 2 weeks ago, you would have died in the first engagement." The training facility worked around the clock. Federation soldiers learned about camouflage, something they had never considered necessary in space warfare. Engineers began modifying their ships' energy signatures to create false readings. Intelligence officers studied psychological warfare and deception tactics. Not everyone adapted easily. Some Federation officers resigned rather than abandon their traditional combat doctrines. Others embraced the new ways with surprising enthusiasm, particularly the younger ones who had seen their friends die following the old rules. Late one night, Thompson found General Walker observing the training from a command center. "They're learning," she reported. "Slowly, but they're learning." Walker nodded. "They have to. The swarm has just taken another system. We're running out of time." "Sir," Thompson hesitated, "some of them are scared. Not of the swarm, but of what we're turning them into." "They should be," Walker replied. "War changes everyone it touches, but better to be changed than extinct." Thompson watched the displays showing dozens of training exercises. Federation forces were practicing ambushes, learning to fight dirty, discovering the art of tactical deception. They were becoming more like humans, adaptable, unpredictable, dangerous. "Tomorrow we start teaching them about electronic warfare and cyber attacks," she said. "That should be interesting." Walker smiled grimly. "The swarm thinks they're fighting the same old Federation. They're in for one hell of a surprise." In the simulation chambers below, another group of Federation soldiers prepared for training, ready to learn humanity's ways of war. They were evolving, becoming something new, something that might just survive the coming storm. The bridge of the Federation flagship erupted in shocked silence as they watched the battle unfold. For the first time in the war, a swarm fleet was in full retreat, leaving behind the wreckage of dozens of their ships. Admiral Wilson stood at the tactical display, his face grim with satisfaction. "Replay the engagement," he ordered. The holographic display showed how the Federation forces had executed their trap perfectly. The battle had started conventionally enough, a small Federation fleet facing a larger swarm force. But this time was different. Instead of forming their traditional battle lines, the Federation ships had scattered, appearing weak and disorganized. The swarm, sensing easy prey, had charged forward. "Watch this moment," Wilson pointed. They took the bait perfectly. As the swarm ships pursued what they thought were easy targets, they were drawn into a carefully prepared kill zone. Hidden Federation vessels emerged from behind asteroids and debris fields, their weapons already charged, mines, disguised as space debris, activated in the swarm's midst. The hunters became the hunted. 3 months ago, this would have been unthinkable, said first speaker, who had come to witness the battle. "Our ship's hiding, using deception. The Council is disturbed by these changes." Wilson turned to face them. "Are they more disturbed by the changes, or by how well they're working?" The tactical officer, a Federation veteran who had embraced the new combat doctrine, reported the final numbers. The Federation had lost only 7 ships while destroying over 40 swarm vessels. It was an unprecedented victory ratio. But not everyone was celebrating. In the ship's mess hall, Wilson overheard Federation crew members discussing the battle in hushed tones. "We didn't even give them a chance to form up," one officer said. "We struck before they were ready." "That's the point," another responded. "The humans taught us. Any fair fight is one you might lose." News of the victory spread quickly through Federation space. More battles followed, each implementing human tactical innovations. Federation ships now moved unpredictably, used electronic warfare to confuse swarm targeting systems, and never fought fairly if they could help it. On a Federation colony world, ground forces demonstrated their new capabilities. When swarm landing craft approached, they found no neat rows of defenders waiting for them. Instead, they faced hidden bunkers, automated defense turrets, and troops who used the terrain to their advantage. Colonel Rogers, overseeing the ground defense, watched through binoculars as swarm forces fell into one trap after another. "Your people learn quick," he told his Federation counterpart. The Federation commander's skin changed color, their species equivalent of a grimace. "We learn, yes, but each victory feels less clean than before. We are becoming more like you." "You're becoming survivors," Rogers corrected. "Look there. Your troops just executed a perfect flanking maneuver. 3 months ago, they would have marched straight into enemy fire." The battle for the colony ended in another Federation victory. The swarm, facing unexpected resistance, retreated to space, leaving behind their first major ground defeat of the war. Back on the flagship, Admiral Wilson received the latest intelligence reports. The swarm was altering its tactics, trying to adapt to the Federation's new fighting style. But they were struggling. They had never faced an enemy that fought this way. "They're learning," Wilson mused, "but not fast enough. They've spent too long fighting predictable opponents. They don't know how to handle chaos." First speaker approached him again. "The Council has reviewed the battle recordings. They are impressed by the results, if not the methods. But some ask, when this war is over, can we go back to who we were?" Wilson looked at the tactical display, showing Federation forces preparing another ambush for an approaching swarm fleet. "War changes everyone," he said quietly. "You can't go back, but you can go forward, stronger and wiser." In the depths of space, Federation ships moved silently into position, their crews no longer bound by ancient combat protocols. They had learned humanity's greatest lesson about warfare: survival matters more than tradition. The swarm was about to learn this lesson too, the hard way. Admiral Tom Wilson stood on the bridge of the Federation flagship, watching as his revolutionary battle plan unfolded. The massive holographic display showed hundreds of Federation ships, but they weren't arranged in the neat formations of old. Instead, they moved like a swarm themselves, flowing through space in seemingly random patterns that masked a deadly purpose. "Execute Phase 2, Wilson commanded. The Federation fleet split into smaller groups, appearing to flee in disarray. The pursuing swarm forces, still adapting to the Federation's new tactics, took the bait. They divided their forces to chase what looked like easy prey. They never learn," Wilson muttered. "They still think chaos means weakness." The trap was sprung. Hidden Federation battle groups emerged from their positions in nearby nebulae and asteroid fields. The scattered Federation ships suddenly reversed course, their apparently random movements becoming a complex web of crossfire zones. On the ground, Colonel David Brown was revolutionizing planetary defense. Gone were the days of standing armies and fixed fortifications. He had taught Federation ground forces to think like guerrilla fighters. "Your cities are your best weapons," Brown explained to his alien commanders, pointing at a holographic map. "Every building can be a fortress, every street a kill zone. The swarm expects us to meet them in open battle. Instead, we'll bleed them in urban combat." The Federation soldiers had learned well. When swarm forces landed on the colony world of New Hope, expecting the usual organized resistance, they found themselves caught in a maze of traps and ambushes. "Report from the surface, Admiral," a communications officer announced. "Colonel Brown's forces have destroyed 70% of the swarm landing force. The rest are retreating." Wilson nodded. The swarm was learning a harsh lesson about human warfare. There is no such thing as a fair fight. In orbit, the space battle reached its climax. Federation ships executed complex maneuvers that would have been considered insane 3 months ago. They used their own disabled vessels as mines, turned their engines into weapons, and employed electronic warfare to turn the swarm's tight formation against itself. "Sir," first speaker approached Wilson, their multiple eyes showing concern. "The Council is watching this battle. They say our forces fight like humans now." "They fight like survivors," Wilson corrected. "Look at the casualty reports. We're losing fewer ships, fewer soldiers. The swarm is the one bleeding now." The numbers told the story. In the past month, Federation forces had destroyed over 300 swarm ships, while losing only 40 of their own. Ground battles that once ended in massacre now resulted in Federation victories. But the changes went deeper than tactics. Federation officers now thought differently about warfare. They understood concepts like strategic deception, psychological warfare, and the importance of adaptation. "Admiral," a tactical officer called out, "the swarm fleet is attempting to regroup. They're falling back to their traditional formation." Wilson smiled grimly. "They're predictable. That's why they'll lose." Launch Operation Thunderbolt. Across 3 star systems, carefully positioned Federation forces sprang into action. What the swarm thought was a single battle was actually part of a larger campaign. While they focused on the apparent main threat, Federation strike teams were hitting their supply lines, communication hubs, and staging areas. "Beautiful," Brown commented, watching the strategic display from the ground. "They still think war is about winning battles. They don't understand it's about breaking the enemy's will to fight." The day ended in another Federation victory, but the alien commanders seemed subdued during the debriefing. They had won by using tactics that would have horrified them months ago. "We're not just teaching them to fight," Wilson told Brown later. "We're teaching them to think like us, to see warfare as a tool of survival, not a ceremonial dance." Brown nodded. "They're learning that victory matters more than honor. That survival requires adaptation." In space, the Federation fleet regrouped, preparing for their next operation. They moved like predators now, silent and deadly. The swarm had wanted a war. Thanks to humanity's lessons, they were finally getting one. And they were losing. The Grand Council chamber was silent as Ambassador Robert Smith stood before the assembled representatives of the Federation. The massive room, once filled with proud traditions and ceremonial protocols, now felt different. The war had changed everything. "The swarm has officially surrendered," Smith announced. The words echoed through the chamber, met not with celebration, but with quiet contemplation. The head council member rose, their scales now bearing the marks of wartime stress. "Victory is ours, yes, but at what cost to who we are?" Smith looked around the chamber. Many representatives who had once viewed humans with disdain now couldn't meet his eyes. They had seen what humanity's influence had done to their civilization. "Show them," ordered the head council member. The central holographic display activated, showing a comparison of Federation forces before and after human military advisors took charge. The transformation was stark. Gone were the ceremonial formations and predictable tactics. The new Federation military moved like Earth's predators, adaptable, ruthless, efficient. "In 6 months," Smith said, "your forces achieved what seemed impossible. The swarm, undefeated for centuries, has been broken." First speaker stepped forward, their usual diplomatic calm replaced by something harder. "We succeeded, yes, but we have become something else. Our military now thinks like humans. They question traditions. They seek advantages. They paused, struggling with the concept. They enjoy victory." The chamber erupted in murmured discussions. Some representatives argued that the changes were necessary for survival. Others warned that they had opened a door that could never be closed. "My fellow council members," the head council member addressed the assembly, "we must decide how to proceed. The war is over, but its lessons remain." Smith watched as they debated. The Federation had to face an uncomfortable truth. Humanity hadn't just taught them how to fight. They had shown them a fundamentally different way of thinking about conflict. "We propose," announced a senior council member, "new protocols regarding human military involvement." Their assistance was vital, but also transformative, perhaps dangerously so. The protocols were quickly outlined. Human military advisors would be consulted only in extreme circumstances. Federation forces would attempt to return to their traditional methods of combat. But everyone in the chamber knew things would never be the same. "You fear what we've awakened in you," Smith said quietly. "You're right to be cautious. Humanity's capacity for warfare is both our greatest strength and our heaviest burden." A young Federation officer who had fought alongside human advisors spoke up. "We cannot unlearn what they taught us. The universe is not as peaceful as we pretended. Sometimes survival requires us to be less than perfect." The debate continued for hours. Finally, the council reached its decision. The Federation would maintain its military reforms, but place strict limits on further human military influence. They had learned their lesson. Humans were valuable allies but dangerous teachers. As the session ended, Smith found himself walking with first speaker through the station's observation deck. "Tell me," first speaker asked, "did your people know this would happen? Did you know that teaching us to fight would change us so fundamentally?" Smith watched the stars for a moment before answering. "War changes everyone it touches. We didn't just teach you to fight. We taught you to think like survivors. That's why humans are so good at war, and why we should be your last resort in one." The Federation presented Smith with their highest honors that day, even as many species maintained a careful distance from Earth's representatives. They had learned to respect humanity's power, but also to fear it. In the years that followed, the Federation's military maintained many of the changes humanity had introduced. They never returned to their old ways entirely. They couldn't. They had seen the universe as humans saw it, not as a place of ordained rules and ceremonies, but as a realm where survival sometimes required doing the unthinkable. As Smith's shuttle departed for Earth, he looked back at the Federation station. They had asked for humanity's help in fighting a war. What they'd gotten was a lesson in why humans should be the last species anyone ever wants to fight. The galaxy would remember that lesson for a very long time.